The city streets gleamed under the drizzle, reflecting the neon signs and distant headlights like fragments of a broken mirror. Emma pulled her coat tighter, feeling the chill seep through despite the wool. Every step she took echoed in the empty alleyways, reminding her of how alone she had always been in life. Yet tonight something felt different, as if the air itself was charged with possibility. She had arrived here with little more than hope. A hope fragile enough to break, yet persistent enough to keep her moving forward. The last few months had been a blur of disappointment, jobs she couldn't keep, people who didn't believe in her, doors that closed just as she reached them. And now, standing beneath the flickering glow of a diner sign, she wondered if she had the courage to try again. Her phone buzzed. A single message from a number she had almost forgotten. "Are you okay?" Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she typed back, unsure why such a simple question had the power to make her chest tighten. Anyone, had rarely asked if she was truly okay. People saw her, yes, but never really saw her. She thought about the life she had left behind, quiet towns, people who assumed her dreams were too big or worse, too foolish. They had always told her she would never make it. And now, in this city that pulsed with both danger and opportunity, she realized that proving them wrong mattered more than anything. Thunder rumbled above, and the rain intensified, drumming against the pavement like a heartbeat. Emma pulled her scarf closer around her neck and looked up. That's when she saw him. He was walking with a confidence that seemed to slice through the darkness, his eyes scanning the street until they locked on hers. Emma felt a jolt, an electric awareness that this man, a stranger yet somehow familiar, could change the course of her evening, maybe even her life. "You're late," he said, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. His voice was calm, yet carried a weight that demanded attention. Emma swallowed. "I got held up," she murmured, feeling suddenly shy, almost foolish. But his gaze held no judgment, only curiosity and something warmer, something that whispered of trust yet earned, not given. They walked side by side, their footsteps synchronized without a word. The city around them faded to a blur, just the two of them moving through a world that suddenly seemed alive with unseen potential. For Emma, it was intoxicating. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat seemed like the beginning of something she had longed for but never dared imagine. "You always walk this fast?" he asked after a while, his tone teasing, almost playful. "Depends," she replied, glancing at him. "Depends who's keeping up." A laugh escaped him, low and genuine, and Emma felt a flutter of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that she wasn't destined to be invisible, that her story wasn't over. They reached a small cafe tucked away on a side street, warm light spilling onto the wet sidewalk. He held the door open for her, and as she stepped inside, Emma realized she had been holding her breath. The aroma of coffee and baked bread wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, easing the tension in her shoulders. They found a quiet corner, and she studied him as he ordered. There was an ease about him, an unspoken confidence, but also a softness, an awareness of the world that wasn't hardened by cynicism. Emma felt herself relaxing, letting the layers of fear and self-doubt fall away, if only a little. "You know," he said as he sat across from her, "I didn't think I'd meet someone tonight who changed everything just by showing up." Emma blinked, startled. "I don't think anyone can change everything that fast." He smiled, leaning back. "Maybe not. But sometimes showing up is the hardest part. And maybe that's enough to start." Her heart thumped. She had spent so long hiding, shrinking herself to fit the expectations of others. Now, for the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as a project, not as someone to fix, but as herself. Hours passed unnoticed. They talked about dreams, failures, fleeting hopes, and the small, sacred moments that made life worth living. Each word, each glance, felt like a thread weaving them together in a tapestry of something new, something fragile yet promising. By the time they stepped back into the rain-soaked streets, the city seemed different, brighter, almost breathing with the possibilities of untold stories. Emma looked at him and felt a strange surge of certainty. This was only the beginning. And as they walked side by side into the unknown, Emma realized that perhaps life's cruel lessons, its rejections and disappointments, had only been preparing her for this moment, a chance she could not and would not let slip away. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds of Emma's small apartment, painting golden stripes across the floor. Her mind, however, was far from the gentle warmth of the sun. Last night's encounter replayed like a vivid movie in her thoughts, the laughter, the shared stories, the quiet understanding. She felt an unfamiliar mix of excitement and fear. Coffee in hand, she sat by the window, watching the city wake up. People hurried along the sidewalks, some with purpose, others lost in their own worlds. Emma had always been part of the background, a silent observer of life instead of a participant. But now, something within her urged her forward, daring her to step into the unknown. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from him. Coffee later? Emma hesitated. The rational part of her whispered caution. Who was he really? Could someone who appeared so suddenly in her life truly be genuine, or was this another fleeting illusion she would regret? But then she remembered the feeling in the cafe, the ease, the sincerity, the rare sense of being seen. She typed back without thinking, yes. By mid-afternoon, she found herself standing outside a small, charming cafe tucked between two towering office buildings. He was already there, leaning casually against the wall, a cup of coffee in hand, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. "You're punctual," he teased. "Only because I wasn't sure if you'd be," she replied, smiling despite the nervous flutter in her chest. They settled into a quiet corner again, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. Hours seemed to vanish as they shared their pasts, her struggles, his triumphs, the dreams they had shelved away for fear of failure. Emma realized that in his presence, vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was a bridge, a way to connect deeply without pretense. But as the afternoon waned, the world beyond the cafe intruded. A sudden noise, a sharp, almost panicked cry, echoed from the street outside. Emma and her companion exchanged a glance before stepping out. Across the street, a small crowd had gathered. A young woman, visibly distressed, was pleading with someone. Emma's heart raced. Instinctively, she moved closer. Something about the scene tugged at her conscience, demanding her attention. She recognized the fear, the desperation, the feeling of being powerless in a moment that mattered more than anything. Without a word, he followed her, and together they approached the crowd. The woman turned, her eyes wide and filled with tears. "Please, someone help." Emma's stomach tightened. This wasn't part of any plan, and yet it felt inevitable. She felt her hands clench into fists, the remnants of last night's courage surging back. She couldn't walk away. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "My brother, he's trapped in that car," the woman cried, pointing to a vehicle pinned beneath a fallen tree. The rain from earlier had softened the ground, and the branches were slick and heavy. Emma felt a pang of dread. Emergency services hadn't arrived yet. He looked at her, a silent question in his eyes. Emma nodded, determination hardening her features. Together they moved closer, assessing the situation. Every step required caution, every movement careful, but there was no room for hesitation. Minutes felt like hours. They worked together, lifting, guiding, supporting, until finally the young man inside the car was free, coughing and shaken but alive. The relief was palpable, a shared exhale of gratitude and triumph. The woman clutched Emma's hands, tears mingling with rain. "Thank you. I don't know what we would have done without you." Emma's companion placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of their shared courage. In that moment, Emma felt something profound. Life wasn't just about waiting for the right moment. Sometimes it demanded action, demanded bravery, demanded trust in oneself. As they walked away from the scene, soaked and exhausted, Emma felt a shift within her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was alive in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be before. He looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, then softened. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. Emma shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "I did. And I'm glad I did." They walked in silence for a few blocks, the city around them humming with life, yet they were in a bubble of shared understanding. Every glance, every touch of the hand felt electric, binding them closer with an invisible thread. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Emma felt a twinge of apprehension. Life had thrown them together in a whirlwind of chance and courage, but the question lingered: how long could this fragile connection withstand the pressures of reality? For the first time in a long while, she didn't have an answer. And for the first time, she felt that it was okay not to. Because tonight she realized the world was vast, unpredictable, and terrifyingly beautiful, and she was ready to embrace it. The following days passed in a blur. Emma found herself caught between the exhilaration of new experiences and the comfort of routines she had long relied upon. Every morning she woke to the city's hum, yet now it seemed alive in ways she hadn't noticed before, the chatter of street vendors, the rumble of buses, the laughter spilling from cafes. But alongside the thrill, there was unease. Memories of the accident lingered in her mind like shadows that refused to vanish. She kept replaying the scene, wondering if she had done enough, if she had acted swiftly enough. And then there was him, the man who had been her silent companion through the chaos. Who was he, really? Why had fate thrown them together so violently and yet so perfectly? One evening, he invited her to dinner at a quaint Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet alley. Candles flickered across the tables, casting warm light on the exposed brick walls. The aroma of garlic and fresh basil filled the air. For a moment, Emma felt she had stepped into a different world, one untouched by fear, one that promised possibility. He spoke little at first, letting the gentle music and the clinking of cutlery set the rhythm. But soon, his questions grew more personal, more probing. "Emma," he said softly, "do you ever feel like your life has been written for you rather than by you?" Emma froze, considering. She had asked herself this countless times but never aloud. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I've learned you can't wait for permission to live." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Exactly. And yet so many of us do. We let fear dictate our choices, even when our hearts scream otherwise." Conversation drifted to dreams and disappointments, to the invisible burdens they carried, the secrets they kept buried. And as they talked, Emma felt herself letting go of long-held reservations. She shared stories she had never told anyone, the time she had failed, the time she had succeeded quietly, the night she had cried alone, and the moment she had laughed so hard it hurt. And then, just as the candlelight danced across their faces, he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Touch was gentle, grounding, yet electric, sending shivers up her spine. Emma's pulse quickened, and for a moment the world narrowed to the warmth of his hand, the sincerity in his eyes. But just as the connection deepened, a shadow of doubt crept in. She remembered a call she had received earlier that week, a message from an old friend warning her to be cautious, to not be blinded by charm and coincidence. "People aren't always who they seem," the message read. Emma pulled her hand back, unsure. The evening's magic seemed to falter, replaced by the gnawing worry that she might be stepping into something she couldn't control. I should go," she said, her voice trembling slightly. He looked surprised but didn't protest. "Of course," he said gently. "I understand." As she stepped out into the cool night, the city lights blurred through her tears. She walked briskly, desperate to make sense of the conflicting emotions swirling inside her. Fear, excitement, hope, and doubt collided in a storm she had no instructions for navigating. By the time she reached her apartment, she was breathless, not just from the cold but from the weight of the choices she now faced. She knew one thing: life was no longer predictable, and the man who had entered her life had shaken its foundations. Days later, she received an unexpected package at her doorstep. No return address, just her name written in elegant script. Inside, she found a leather-bound journal. Confused, she opened it, and the first page contained a note in his handwriting. "Emma, I didn't want to scare you, but there are things you need to know, truths about my life that may change everything. Read carefully. Decide what you wish to believe." Emma's heart raced. She had glimpsed courage before, but this was something different. It demanded more than bravery. It demanded trust and perhaps surrender. As she flipped through the pages, revelations spilled out. Hidden pasts, unresolved conflicts, choices that had haunted him, and sacrifices he had made. Each entry pulled her deeper into his world, and with each secret revealed, Emma realized that their fates were intertwined in ways she could not yet comprehend. By the time she finished, night had fallen completely. Rain tapped lightly against her window, mirroring the tremors in her chest. She understood now that life had a way of forcing confrontations with destiny, whether one was ready or not. And Emma, despite every fear, every hesitation, felt an undeniable pull toward what was coming next. Somewhere in the city, he was waiting. And for the first time, Emma didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat, locked the door, and stepped out into the night. The rain had soaked her hair, but Emma barely noticed. The city streets glistened under the streetlights, reflections stretching like liquid gold across the pavement. Every step she took toward him felt both inevitable and terrifying. She wondered what secrets awaited her, what truths she might uncover, and whether she could handle them. She found him standing under the awning of a small cafe, the flickering neon sign casting a halo of light around him. His expression softened the moment he saw her, but his eyes held shadows she had never seen before. "You came," he said, voice low but steady. "I had to," Emma replied. Her chest ached with a mixture of anticipation and fear. "I need to understand everything." He nodded, leading her inside to a quiet corner. Cafe was nearly empty, the aroma of coffee and pastry enveloping them in a fragile sense of normalcy. He placed the journal on the table between them. "These entries," Emma began, flipping through the pages again. "These are your life?" "Yes," he admitted, fingers brushing hers as he held the book. "Every choice, every mistake, every secret I've tried to bury, it's all here. I wanted you to know so you could decide if you want to be part of it." Emma's hands trembled. She read, absorbing revelations that were at once shocking and heartbreaking. Family betrayals, moments of cowardice and courage intertwined, sacrifices made in silence, and debts owed to people who might still haunt him. The depth of his struggles made her realize how much she had underestimated him. "Why tell me now?" she asked, looking up, searching his eyes. "Because I trust you," he said simply. "And because hiding the truth from you would be unfair. You deserve the choice." The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy fog. Trust. Choice. Two things she had rarely been offered so freely. And yet, the decision she faced was monumental, to walk away and preserve her safety, or to step fully into his world, uncertain and dangerous, but alive in ways she had never known. Hours passed unnoticed as they talked, as she asked questions and he answered with brutal honesty. Every revelation was a test, of courage, of judgment, of their connection. And with each layer peeled back, Emma felt the fragile threads of fear intertwining with a stronger thread, something powerful, almost magnetic, pulling her closer to him. Finally, he leaned back, letting out a slow sigh. "I know this is overwhelming. I can't ask you to stay if you're not ready. But I also can't hide from you who I am, not anymore." Emma sat in silence, heart pounding. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glimmering like a mirror to the night sky. She thought of all she had run from, all she had endured, and the rare moments of clarity she had glimpsed in her own life. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "But I do know this. I can't walk away with her." A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at his lips. Relief softened the hard edges of his expression. "Then we face it together," he said. And in that moment, amidst the echoes of their pasts and the uncertainty of the future, something unspoken passed between them, a promise, fragile yet unbreakable. Outside, the first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon, painting the city in muted gold. Emma realized that the crossroads of truth they had reached was not an ending, but the beginning of something far greater. A journey that demanded courage, trust, and above all, the willingness to embrace life in all its unpredictable intensity. She squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of determination. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we face it together." He nodded, eyes locking with hers in a silent vow. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Emma allowed herself to believe, not in guarantees, not in safety, but in the raw, unshakable power of choice and the possibilities it could bring. The city had awakened in a soft haze of early morning fog, yet Emma felt a heaviness pressing on her chest, like the night had left behind invisible scars. Cafe had emptied, leaving only the echo of their whispered confessions. She walked beside him in silence, each step a fragile balance between curiosity and fear. "Why did you hide this from me?" she asked at last, voice trembling. "Everything, all the danger, all the secrets." He paused, looking at her with eyes that seemed to carry a lifetime of regret. "Because I thought I was protecting you," he said. "I thought if you didn't know, you wouldn't get hurt. But protecting you by keeping the truth. I realize now that was selfish." Emma felt a pang of understanding. The journal had revealed his flaws, his human mistakes, and yet there was a courage in that honesty that made her heart ache. She remembered the night she had spent alone, questioning her choices, wondering if she could ever trust anyone fully again. And here he was, offering her the raw, unfiltered truth. "Do you regret it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I regret hiding it," he admitted. "Not telling you sooner. But I don't regret you or this," he gestured between them. "Whatever we're building." They walked in silence until they reached the old bridge, a place he had shown her in the first week they met. The river beneath them glimmered like shattered glass, reflecting the uncertain light of dawn. Emma's thoughts drifted back to the past, the betrayals, the mistakes, the people who had shaped them both. Shadows of fear and doubt lingered, threatening to pull her backward. But as she looked at him, she felt something stronger, a sense of belonging, a tether to someone who understood her unspoken struggles. "Promise me something," she said, stopping mid-step. He turned to her, eyebrows slightly furrowed. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what shadows come, no matter the secrets, we face them together," she said, gripping his hand tightly. He nodded solemnly. "I promise." The word hung between them like a delicate thread, fragile yet binding. And in that moment, Emma realized that life's uncertainty was no longer something to fear, it was something to embrace, as long as they faced it side by side. Hours passed, blending into a slow rhythm of trust and conversation. They shared laughter and quiet revelations, moments that stitched invisible threads of connection deeper into their hearts. Yet even as they forged this bond, the past remained, a persistent echo of unfinished business, unhealed wounds, and questions that demanded answers. By the time the sun broke fully over the horizon, Emma felt a subtle shift within her. She was no longer the person who had hesitated at the crossroads of truth. She had chosen, chaos and all, and in doing so had claimed a new version of herself, one resilient enough to face the storms ahead. As they watched the city come alive, he finally spoke again, softer this time. "The past isn't gone. But maybe we can write the future differently." Emma smiled, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "We will," she said. "Together." And for the first time, the shadows of the past didn't feel like chains. They felt like stepping stones, guiding them toward a horizon that was theirs to define. The evening sky blazed with streaks of gold and crimson, a mirror of the tumult within Emma's heart. She stood at the edge of the cliff where the city seemed to fall away beneath her, the wind tugging at her hair and her doubts alike. Beside her, he remained silent, watching the horizon with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Are you afraid?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the rush of wind. He shook his head. "No. Not anymore. Not with you." Emma's lips curved into a tentative smile. The journey had been treacherous, lies, betrayals, mischances, and the haunting shadows of the past, but somehow they had survived it all. Together. Every scar, every tear had led them here to this moment, where the future wasn't a question but a canvas waiting to be painted. "I used to think life was about avoiding pain," she said, voice breaking slightly. "But now I see it's about choosing the right person to face it with. Pain is inevitable. Love, that's the miracle." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, grounding her in the present. "Then let's choose it. Every day. Pain, joy, everything. Together." Emma took a deep breath, letting the salty wind fill her lungs, carrying away fear and doubt alike. She could feel the weight of her past lifting, replaced by a quiet strength, a certainty she hadn't known she possessed. "Together," she echoed. And in that single word, a lifetime of uncertainty dissolved. They stepped closer, letting the cliff's edge remind them of the fragility of life, the preciousness of every shared heartbeat. They didn't need promises etched in stone or vows whispered beneath chandeliers. Their bond was forged in the trials, in the raw truth of their shared experiences, unbreakable because it was real. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in shades of fire and shadow, they turned back toward the city. It was alive, bustling, indifferent to their triumphs and failures, but in that vast, indifferent world they had found their own sanctuary. A world built not on illusions or fear, but on understanding, trust, and the fierce determination to protect what they cherished most, each other. Emma squeezed his hand, a silent vow of resilience and love. "We survived everything," she said. "And now we live. Truly live." He smiled, the kind of smile that held storms and sunshine all at once. "Yes, we do." Together, they walked away from the cliff, leaving behind shadows that had once threatened to consume them. Every step was a declaration, a promise to embrace life in its entirety, the light, the darkness, and everything in between. The horizon stretched endlessly before them, a new chapter waiting to be written, and for the first time in their lives they faced it not with fear but with courage, hope, and love that would withstand the tests of time. 'Cause in the end, survival wasn't the victory. Love was. And that, Emma realized, was worth every scar, every secret, every shadow that had led them to this new horizon.